Hundreds of delegates from various countries at the United Nations General Assembly created a dramatic and unexpected scene on Friday, September 26, 2025. A mass walkout occurred precisely as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu prepared to deliver his official speech from the podium. This moment marked one of the most striking acts of protest in the Assembly's history, symbolizing open defiance against Israel's leader on the world stage, broadcast live to a global audience. The delegates leaving the hall were not limited to representatives from the Middle East, but also included those from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, demonstrating a broad spectrum of disapproval. This scene quickly became a symbol of Israel's fragile diplomatic standing, eroded by the ongoing war in Gaza. As Netanyahu approached the podium, cameras captured lines of delegates rising from their seats and exiting in silence. The action was clearly calculated, not coincidental, signaling a deliberate political protest. Nevertheless, a number of Netanyahu's supporters remained inside. They stood and clapped loudly, attempting to create the impression of strong backing. Yet the applause was overshadowed by the growing number of empty seats, which dominated the view of the assembly hall. For the international public, those images were undeniable proof that Netanyahu was facing significant resistance, even in a setting that typically emphasizes diplomatic decorum. Against this tense backdrop, the walkout instantly drew the attention of global media and spread across social platforms. The event underlined that Israel is no longer only under military criticism, but is also confronting a deepening crisis of legitimacy before the eyes of the world. The mass walkout at the United Nations General Assembly immediately triggered responses from various parties, particularly from the Palestinian resistance movement, Hamas. In an official statement, Hamas welcomed the action of hundreds of delegates as a clear signal that Israel is becoming increasingly isolated. According to Hamas, the boycott of Netanyahu's speech was not a spontaneous incident but a deliberate demonstration of global solidarity with the suffering of the Palestinian people. Izzat al-Ris, a senior political bureau member of Hamas, issued a sharp remark that quickly gained international attention. He stated that Netanyahu had nothing to rely on except a handful of supporters who deliberately entered the assembly hall to clap, as if to create the illusion of widespread support. This statement resonated widely because it highlighted the weakness of Netanyahu's standing in the face of international opinion. Hamas further accused Netanyahu of repeating falsehoods and blatantly denying the reality of genocide in Gaza. Such allegations added another dramatic layer to the battle of narratives at the international level, where Israel sought to portray itself as a victim of attacks, while its opponents emphasized systematic crimes against humanity. In addition, Hamas condemned Netanyahu for covering up the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, particularly the systematic starvation caused by the blockade. These harsh words amplified the perception that Israel is under mounting moral pressure. Hamas's swift reaction demonstrated how every moment on the global stage is immediately connected back to the situation in Gaza. The boycott of Netanyahu's speech was hailed as a symbolic diplomatic victory, one that undermined Israel's image and signaled that international solidarity for Palestine is steadily growing. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu eventually delivered his address before the United Nations General Assembly, yet the atmosphere in the hall was tense and unavoidably altered by the mass walkout. The empty seats left behind by departing delegates created a stark visual backdrop as Netanyahu took the podium. In his speech, he once again insisted that Israel had the right to defend itself against militant attacks from Gaza. However, his argument seemed increasingly unconvincing, spoken into a room where the majority had already staged a protest by walking out. Observers noted that Netanyahu attempted to shift the blame by portraying Palestinian resistance groups as the cause of Gaza's suffering. Yet this rhetoric appeared recycled, echoing previous talking points that many analysts argued no longer held weight. Meanwhile, international media outlets emphasized the contrast between Netanyahu's words and the reality on the ground, where reports from humanitarian agencies highlighted the rising number of civilian casualties and worsening humanitarian conditions. Even among those who remained in the chamber, the reactions were divided. Some applauded, but the applause could not mask the dominance of empty chairs that visually overwhelmed the broadcast. This contradiction revealed the widening gap between Israel's official narrative and the prevailing sentiment among the global community. Analysts stressed that what occurred in the assembly was not merely a diplomatic performance but a clear indicator of shifting international opinion. On the world's most visible platform, the symbolic impact of delegates leaving carried more weight than the speech delivered from the podium. What was intended as a moment for Netanyahu to reinforce his legitimacy instead became a spectacle underscoring Israel's weakening position in the eyes of the international community. The impact of the walkout at the United Nations General Assembly did not remain confined to the walls of the chamber. International media immediately made the event headline news. Major news outlets highlighted how Netanyahu appeared in an increasingly difficult position, with some describing the moment as one of the most humiliating episodes of his political career. Photographs and video clips of delegates leaving circulated rapidly, becoming powerful symbols of global disapproval of Israel's policies in Gaza. On social media platforms, the clips went viral, amassing millions of views within hours. Online narratives largely expressed sympathy toward Palestinians and outrage at Israel's continued actions. Hashtags connected to the boycott of Netanyahu's speech quickly trended worldwide, demonstrating the digital ripple effect of the protest. Analysts pointed out that the walkout could mark a turning point in international diplomacy. While Israel has long relied on the support of powerful allies, this event suggested that legitimacy is beginning to erode, even among traditional supporters. For Hamas, the moment became valuable political ammunition, reinforcing their claim that their struggle is not isolated but backed by a growing global moral consensus. The solidarity displayed at the UN gave the Palestinian narrative broader visibility on the world stage. Meanwhile, Netanyahu faced the dual challenge of dealing with mounting domestic discontent over the prolonged conflict and an external environment that was becoming increasingly hostile. As such, the walkout produced layered consequences. It resonated diplomatically, shaped public opinion worldwide, and influenced political dynamics within Israel itself. What unfolded at the UN was not just a symbolic act, but a development that may alter the trajectory of Israel's international standing in the months to come. Reactions to Netanyahu's boycotted speech extended far beyond the UN chamber. Human rights organizations described the mass walkout as a profound signal of distrust toward Israel's policies. Several international groups labeled the protest as one of the clearest moral rebukes ever delivered directly to a head of government on the world stage. Analysts argued that this walkout would be remembered as a precedent in modern diplomacy, since it is rare for a speech at the General Assembly to be met with such a collective and visible rejection. The action sent a message that global opinion could no longer be contained by one-sided political arguments. Countries that walked out emphasized that Gaza's plight was not a local dispute, but a humanitarian crisis demanding worldwide attention. The symbolic support shown in New York was seen as a potential boost to efforts aimed at pressuring Israel across multiple domains, from diplomacy and trade to possible military restrictions. Supporters of Netanyahu attempted to dismiss the incident as political theater, but their narrative faltered as visual evidence spread across the world, showing empty seats and the lack of genuine backing inside the hall. This moment gave Palestinian resistance movements room to claim a moral victory on the international stage. Hamas argued that the walkout proved the world was increasingly standing with the Palestinian people. For many observers, the significance of this protest lay not just in its immediate optics, but in its ability to influence the course of debates at the UN and beyond. The boycott transformed a routine speech into a moment of historic symbolism, undermining Israel's credibility and further fueling a trend toward greater solidarity with Palestine within the global community. The boycott of Benjamin Netanyahu's speech at the United Nations General Assembly is now seen as a defining moment in global diplomacy. In the long history of the Assembly, rarely has such a clear act of solidarity been demonstrated against one head of government. The image of hundreds of delegates walking out before Netanyahu spoke will be remembered as proof that the war in Gaza is no longer a regional matter, but a global moral issue. This act sent a strong message that Israel is facing growing diplomatic isolation, not only from developing nations but increasingly from parts of the developed world as well. Hamas quickly capitalized on the moment, framing it as evidence of rising moral support for the Palestinian struggle. To them, what happened at the UN represented a symbolic diplomatic victory that could not be achieved on the battlefield. International media underscored that the empty seats during Netanyahu's address had become an enduring symbol of resistance, a visual that will continue to shape public perception of Israel's policies. The weight of global opinion now adds to Israel's challenges, amplifying political and diplomatic pressure in ways that may impact its future strategies. Netanyahu, who had sought to use the UN platform to reinforce Israel's legitimacy, instead faced intensified scrutiny and a loss of credibility. Meanwhile, the act of solidarity displayed by delegates who walked out has come to embody the growing voice of humanity on the world stage. In the end, this protest was more than a political gesture. It marked a shift in international consciousness. Calls for justice and humanitarian accountability in Gaza are becoming harder to ignore, and the walkout may stand as a milestone signaling a new chapter in how the world responds to the conflict.